This is Jillian G, and you are listening to the Black Synergy Podcast, where we are stronger together. On this episode of the Black Synergy Podcast, I spoke with accomplished Black indie romance authors and fellow podcast hosts, Christina C. Jones and Alexandra Warren, about how they got their start in the industry. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Black Synergy Podcast. I'm your host, Jillian G, and I am so excited to have two of my favorite Black romance authors on the podcast today. Christina C. Jones is a self-published author of over 30 books. Some of her titles include Didn't Mean to Love You, Love and Other Things, Inevitable Seductions, and her newest release, #Relationship Goals. Alexandra Warren is also self-published and the author of more than 15 books. Some of her titles include Heated Harmonies, Rehearsal for Love, and her newest release, If Only for the Summer. Welcome to the podcast, ladies.
Thanks for having us. And thanks for that warm introduction.
I know, I was listening okay. We sound good. Okay, I'll take that.
Well, listen, you know that you both are experts and deep in the game.
Yeah, that one too.
I was gonna say, I'm working on just accepting compliments instead of getting all embarrassed. So I'm just gonna take it. Thank you.
All right, so let me start off by saying it was such a pleasure and so much fun to meet you both at Behind the Pen in New York.
Absolutely.
That was so much fun. Yes. All right, so let's get into it. So how long have you both been writing?
I have been writing. I published my first project in November 2013. So I'm coming up on 4 years, which feels really weird to say because it feels like a lot has happened in 4 years. Yeah. I don't think I really thought about that lately, that a month from now it'll be 4 years.
Well, you were able to answer fluently, and I had to go look it up. Okay, so that came out when? So I've been writing since February 2015. So it'll be almost 3 years. Crazy to say.
So what made you?
That time has flown.
I know. Jesus.
So what made you ladies go the indie route as opposed to a traditional publishing company?
Well, for me, when looking into it and started feeling like, okay, this could really be something, like this could be a serious thing. When I started looking into it and I was finding out that it could take 2 or 3 months for you to hear back, from some of these publishers, if you ever heard back at all. And the way my patience is set up, I was like, there has to be another, there has to be another way. There has to be another solution. And I was honestly just kind of experimenting when I decided to self-publish, but I put it up and people, for whatever reason, actually liked it. And so it was kind of like, oh, okay, this might work. And I've just stuck with it since then.
So for me, I'm so glad that Christina is on here because I love telling this story and embarrassing her. So I never, being an author, that was never something that was even on my radar until I met Christina. And she started telling me, I don't know how we even started talking about publishing, but she said, oh, girl, I self-publish. I go through Amazon, and then I started looking it up. And I'm like, this just makes so much sense. Why would I use a middleman when I could just do it myself? Yes, it is a lot of work, but it's still a lot of work to publish traditionally, too. And so it's why would I even use the traditional publishing middleman if I can do it myself?
Now, when did you both get that impulse that you knew you had to write and actually publish your work? Because I'm sure there are tons of writers out there who write in maybe journals or they write whole books or poetry or whatever the case may be, but they just never publish it. When was it that you knew that, okay, you know what, I have to get my work out there?
Well, for me, when I started writing again as an adult, I don't know that it wasn't really, I don't think that I really had it in my head that, okay, I'm going to publish this. I was pregnant, and I was very, very sick. And so, and this was 2012, and I was very, very sick, and I spent a whole lot of time like in bed in the dark. And so I just had stories just started kind of coming to me, and I had all of this kind of going in my head. And as you know, I had the baby that was Zoe. I had Zoe, and I was home with her. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was home with her and with my oldest child, and I just had this itch to do something that was just for me. Like, I had my graphic design business at the time, but I wanted to do something that was just for me, and that's when I picked up writing again. And I ended up in a writing group with this group of ladies. I'm going to have to ask one of them how we even ended up all together, because I honestly can't even remember how we ended up all together. But we were in this writing group, and as I talked to them and as I started putting my story down and started developing it, I'm having a hard time I'm having a hard time articulating what the feeling was or what it was that pushed me. But as I started writing it and as it started coming together into a real story, it kind of set off this itch, I guess, like, okay, I'm going to write this, and then what am I going to do with it? Am I going to just sit on it? Am I going to just let it, am I going to just let it stay on my computer and let it remain just something that's a distant dream? Or am I going to go ahead and go for it? And I decided to go for it.
So for me, once again, I'm so glad Christina is on here, because it's all her fault that I even published anything. But no, so what happened was I was beta reading for her, and I really liked her writing style. That was my first time really reading something that was out of first person. I'm like, oh, I really like how this story is told this way, and let me see what I can do. And so I literally sent her one line of something I was just working on for fun, like with no intentions of publishing. I literally sent her one line. She's like, okay, so now I want to read this whole page, and now I have to see this whole book.
Right, like, girl, I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Where's the rest?
Like, girl, what book? Ain't no book. And then once I found out how the whole self-publishing industry worked, I was like, I really don't have anything to lose. I had did my own cover, right? I had invested my time, of course, putting down the story, but I really wasn't going to lose anything by publishing it. So I just went forward, and after those first couple 5-star reviews came in, I was like, oh, I'm about to keep going then, because people actually like this.
Okay, that's good. So how do you think you've progressed from your first books to your most recent work? Like, in what ways do you think you've grown? Is there anything that you do differently?
For me, I think I tell a more complete story now. I feel like in the beginning it was, I still enjoyed that work, but it was just very surface level, whereas now I feel like I really get into who the characters are a little more, what their story is a little more, and things like that.
I think I would say the same thing for me. I know one way is with that very first project with Love and Other Things, I wrote that book, and then I went through and I took out all the sex scenes because I was embarrassed. They weren't very good sex scenes anyway. But I went through and I wrote out all the sex scenes. But then it just I just felt sick to my stomach, no, this isn't right. And so I went back and I wrote them. I put them back in. I pulled them out. I didn't actually delete them or anything like that. I still had a document with them in there. But I ended up putting them back in there, and it's just funny to me how differently, back then I was embarrassed to have the sex scenes in there at all, and now I'm like, okay, so when are they gonna have sex? That's one of my parts that I consider getting to write those parts like rewards, and I think about just how much more in-depth my stories are. Just like Alex said, it's in the beginning when you're kind of, you're learning and you're growing and I think there's a whole lot to be said about just finishing something, about just doing it, and about getting to the end and being able to say that you completed something. And I think that in the beginning there was maybe a lot more of that, And now I feel like I take my time a little more. And I feel like I dig more into the characters now than I did back then.
Books have like doubled in size.
Mine too. Like I still complain about it. Like, why is this so long? Like, I have a book now that I want to say it's like 130,000 words. And if I compare that to the past, that one book is like 4 books of mine, and I'm like, what is happening here? And it's like, even though you see the page count and the word count, you see it going up, but it's like the story isn't over. Like, I can't, and it's like, it's not even that this story is so much more different than something I would have written 3 years ago, but now it's like I have more of an awareness of telling more of the story. Like, it's not that I've told any less of a complete story. It's just that now I feel more inclined to tell more of the story.
Same.
And you know what? And for both of you, that's one thing that I love about your books is that they are romance. They're romance, but you two, you do a very good job at going in depth. So it's just not something just kind of light and flighty and cutesy and that's it. You guys go into a really good range of different topics and subjects and emotions. And listen, y'all take me through it. And I'm sure like everybody else, like we all commiserate with that, online in these groups. And we're like, listen, I had real emotions going through this book. So I really applaud you guys for being able to do that. I think that's amazing.
Well, what's so funny to me is that I have this goal. Like, I really want to truly write something that is just fluffy. That is just surface level. And it's like, I start, and then somebody's parents died in a fire, and it's like I really just want to write. Like, we joke with Nicole Falls, like this thing. Oh, can I curse?
Go ahead.
Well, this fucking fall in love thing. Like, I really want to do something that is literally just that, and I started, and it always turns into something else. But I appreciate that the way that it turns out is valued, but it frustrates me that I cannot seem to write something that is just that.
Well, and that's what If Only But For the Summer was supposed to be. Just something, warm for the summer, fun and light. And it was in most places, but then people hit me up like, yeah, girl, you made me cry. And I'm like, for what? Like, why were you crying? And then I read it back one day, and I was like, okay, I understand. Like, I get it.
Isn't that like one of your longest projects? Isn't that one of your longer projects? These characters just have no respect for what our plans are. It never goes like that.
So what advice would you give Christina and Alex from book number 1?
I would say to not be concerned with, I'll say it like this. I think, and this is not exactly answering, it is answering your question, but it's not exactly. But I think that for a lot of, who are kind of still, who are still kind of cementing themselves, still kind of building their places and different things like that, I think that a lot of times we get caught up in trying to impress our peers versus impressing our readers. And I think that a lot of the things that we get caught up in as young authors, okay, I need to make sure that my book is this, I need to make sure that my book is that, I can't use these adverbs, I can't do this, I can't do that. Readers don't care about any of that. You're like, as like writers, I see like a lot of writing advice and stuff like that, and we get really caught up in these lofty, kind of things that readers don't even care about. And I mean, who are you writing for? Are you writing for your readers, or are you writing for your peers? And so that's the question, that I would ask myself, because I feel like in those early days, once you enter the quote unquote the community, it's like you're trying to create your place, and you're trying to carve out your lane, and you hear the chatter of your peers, and you hear what they're saying they like and they don't like, and all this different stuff like that. And it's like, screw that. Write your book. There is an audience for everything. Write your book, and if you impress your readers, you'll have a career. Who cares if you impress your peers? Because they're not. Trust me, they're not buying your books.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the ones.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the ones who are, who are getting you ranked on Amazon and getting those, getting those 5-star reviews and stuff like that. That's not. I mean, some. Don't get me wrong. Writers do also read, but when it comes down to, who you're going to write for and who you're going to aim at entertaining, that your aim needs to be your readers, and your readers are going to, if you write a good story, your readers are going to gravitate to you just by you being, writing what feels true to you and writing and sticking by what feels right for you.
Yeah, I can kind of piggybacking off that. I think my thing, my piece of advice would be to decide who are you writing for. And I think for me, the first book in my head, I was thinking more like, how would this be accepted on a mainstream level, even though I don't technically write for a mainstream audience. So there were certain things where I called myself like, oh, should he say nigga or should he say bro? Like, just in case.
Oh, I struggled with that in the beginning too.
And so just being aware of, okay, who's actually going to pick up my book, and who do I care picks up my book, and how can I, do it for that audience versus trying to think so broad that I'm compromising my writing.
That's a very, very good point. And to kind of go back, was there ever a time that you guys felt insecure about your writing, like worried what other people might think, like your family members, pastor at church, different things like that? Did you ever have like, those kind of feelings like, I don't want Pastor Jones to be reading this?
Oh, definitely. My husband is the leader of the men's ministry at my church. And I actually work in children's ministry, of all things. I work in children's ministry at my church, and I love those kids too. But anyway, like I will have, like when I post pictures and stuff from events, it never fails that I'll have like people at my church come up to me like, oh my God, I knew you said you were an author, but I didn't know that you were like really an author, and different things like that. And they're like, bring me a book. And I'm like, no, oh my God. No, like I cannot have, the mothers of the church reading my books. And like my husband, he will tell you, like when he usually comes to events with me, and he'll tell the pastor, I can't be here because, for this reason. And the pastor's like, oh, does she want to host an event or something at the church? And I'm like, no, I do not want to. That on the list of things that I want to do, that is about the last on that list. I absolutely do not want to host a romance event. I don't want to put like, can you imagine? I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna read JJ's birthday scene from Love in the Highlight Reel.
Oh my goodness!
I'm gonna do a reading. Reading of that at the church, but luckily for me, my pastor, Lord, the man's name is completely blank from me. Please forgive me, but luckily I have a pastor who is very, I don't want to say that he's progressive because that's not exactly what I mean, but he is he's very much of the feeling that, just because you're Christian, the Christian folks, it doesn't mean you can't have fun. It doesn't mean, you won't have a red cup at the barbecue. His favorite thing is, he talks about how he'll light you up in spades, at the church picnic and different things like that. And he's very much, and it's helped me with that. I feel like if my pastor is good with me, none of y'all have a reason to have anything else to say. And I mean, and I don't feel any personal conviction, and I mean that's an important thing. You shouldn't, ignore when you feel convicted about something. You shouldn't ignore it. But I don't feel any personal conviction, and so that helps too.
Yeah, I don't know if there's just like a block in my head that I don't even think about it, like when I'm actually writing. But then I like give my parents a copy of my paperback, so I'm just like, okay, you don't have to read this though. Like, just have it on display in the house.
Like, please don't read it.
Don't open any of the pages. But I mean, my parents are cool. My mom was a reader, and she, part of the reason why I became a reader and why I like Black romance in particular. And so she gets it, but it's also like, okay, I don't want to read my daughter writing about sex, so like I'll support you without consuming.
So what you mean to tell me is, Christina, you don't want Mother Jenkins to read the first line of Inevitable Seductions. Is that what you're telling me?
Please don't. Oh my God. And my pastor is Pastor George L. Parks. I do not know why his name blank for me, but in case anybody from my church is listening, I know the pastor's name. I gave his welcome a few months ago. So.
All right, so to circle back around what Alex just said, why Black romance specifically? Like, there are so many different subgenres of romance. Why did you guys choose to write Black romance specifically?
It's just always been ingrained in me from pretty early. Like the first adult book where I saw Black people. I was reading Omar Tyree, I was reading Fly Girl and, Eric Jerome Dickey and Zane when I was like 12 or something like that. And so I had always been a reader before that, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. Well, I was pretty old when I was reading Harry Potter. But, the Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia, Babysitter's Club. Like, I had always been a reader. But it's like once I found those books where the people looked like me, it's like that just kind of unlocked a whole other thing. Like that unlocked a whole different thing. And it really took my love of reading to a whole different level. And I think that from there, that's just kind of been what I've always gravitated to. I can't say that I was ever really into, like, don't get me wrong, I've read Brenda Jackson, Beverly Jenkins, I've read all of them, but that's not really where I didn't really cut my teeth on traditional Black romance. I was reading more, Ed Jerome Dickey, who I don't think he's considered romance, but all of the books have a heavy romantic element to them. And so that's kind of where I cut my teeth. And you've probably heard me or seen me, if you've read any interviews that I've done before where I've called him the blueprint before. And I really feel like that, like I know for a lot of romance authors, their people are, the Brenda Jackson, like I said, Beverly Jenkins, Rochelle Ehlers. And of course, when we're looking at specifically at Black romance, those are our foremothers, I guess. It feels weird to call them that, but they're still alive.
Right.
But those were our kind of originators. But for me, I look at it, even though it's weird to say this about a man, but I look at Eric Jerome Dickey, and those are the people that in his ilk, him, Terry McMillan, all of them. Those are kind of who I look at as my originators. And I kind of think that that's reflected in what I write too, because what I write, I don't really consider it like quote unquote traditional romance. So I just kind of, Black romance, Black contemporary fiction, that was kind of my first love. And so that's what I do.
So I think for me, I knew when I sat down to write that I wanted to write something that I felt like I knew and understood on a deeper level. And so it wasn't even a question like, oh, am I going to write? Like, what type of people am I going to write? Like, I know Black people. I live with Black people. I watch Black love every day in my household. Why would I even think to write something different? And that was, always what was given, or what was not given to me, what was around the house that I just snuck and read. And so, it really wasn't even like something, I don't know if I even consciously thought about it until maybe I was older, but like it was, I don't know, that's just what I went to automatically.
Now, are there any other genres that you can see yourself writing? Will you always just stick with romance, or do you think you would want to move into just straight women's fiction, or is there anything else that you might want to try to get into?
I'll probably end up doing some women's fiction and maybe some thrillers and some different stuff like that. But I think that I'll probably always have that romantic element. I don't know that I can get away from it just because I enjoy it so much, and so much of what I enjoy about writing is developing that interpersonal relationship, between the characters. And I mean, of course, that's not always romantic, but I like the romance. I like the romantic element of it. And so even if I do go, spread out into other genres, I think that everything that I do will probably always have a romantic element to it, except for the children's books. My kids want to write a book, and I've been promising them that for a while, but they won't get their idea together. We gotta sit them down and get their ideas together. But of course, the kids' book wouldn't have a romantic element. But anything for me, it'll probably still have that element to it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I definitely want to always have some type of romantic element in my writing. But I'm working on a romantic suspense that has to be out by the end of the year. So
okay, and I will remind you of that.
Every podcast that I'm on, so everybody can hold me accountable in cyberspace.
All right, so in addition to being writers, you guys also host one of my favorite podcasts. So let's talk about the Girl Have You Read podcast and the website. How did those both come to be?
It's something that had been on my heart for a while, because for me, as an author, when I was kind of early on trying to find, I was trying to promote myself. I was trying to market, trying to find places, blogs and different things like that to share my book. But when I would go to these blogs, it was either all books about white people, or if there were, it was either all books about white people, or there were a few that were specific to multicultural romance or different things like that. But even when I looked at those, it was never two black people in a relationship together, or it was maybe a couple sprinkled through, but it was almost always interracial romance. And so it was kind of like, it felt like there was no place for me. It felt like there was nothing out there that was about centering black people loving other black people. And so it had been kind of on my heart for a while, but I didn't have the time. I knew that it was going to be a big undertaking, and so it just kind of sat around. And I ended up talking to Alex about it, because Alex had started writing by this time too. I kind of mentioned it to her, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds really dope." And we kind of talked about it for a little bit, and then life happened, and we were writing, and nothing really came of it. But then it kind of came around to, I'm trying to remember what happened. There was a catalyst, but I can't remember it now. So it must not have, in the grand scheme, it must not be, that important. But there came a point where it was like, no, seriously, for real, let's do this. And Alex, she was down. She was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And so we made it happen.
I feel like this is like a movement in the indie black romance genre. You guys bring together so many writers and fans. I found out about so many different new writers and books and things like that from Girl Have You Read. And one of the things that I notice and I love is the camaraderie and the sisterhood between all of you authors. I just think that's so amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's important. Like I have kind of admittedly pulled back just after a couple of experiences that I had. I've kind of pulled back. I'm not as friendly as I used to be, or not as open, I guess, as I used to be. But I think it's important. Like, we have to, we have to be there for each other. We have to support each other. And especially with Girl Have You Read, I try, for me, even if there are authors, that are my peers that I just honestly don't like on a personal level, just honestly, I do not like you. But if you put a book out, it's gonna be on Girl Have You Read. Like if it fits the criteria, it's gonna be on Girl Have You Read, because even though I don't really rock with you, I want to see you succeed, because it's good for the culture. We need your voice. Even if I don't like you, it's not about Christina. It's about putting you with the reader who needs what you have. It's about putting, it's about uplifting all of us. And I feel like that's something that gets lost a lot of times when we Black people, when we are doing things, we kind of let personal stuff get in the way. And even if I have to be like, Alex, email that thing and ask her about her book. Right, I'm still going to do it, because it's not about CCJ. Girl Have You Read is not about Christina, and it's not about Alex. It's about the culture. And I feel like if more of us thought about it that way, I think that we could kind of be a lot further than we are. But I do think that strides are being made, and I do think that things are shifting and things are developing. So I'm just glad to see it.
Yeah, and it's amazing what happens when you create a space for people to be comfortable in, and to have somewhere to share their work. And how many people I feel like I found out about through Girl Have You Read, just scouring Amazon every week for these new releases and saying, oh, this actually sounds like a good book. Let me check this out. The next thing you know, I'm in their inbox like people do me. Like, oh, so when that next book coming out? And so it's been, wonderful to be a part of the community, but also be able to have something that brings the community together.
That concludes part 1 of my interview with authors Christina C. Jones and Alexandra Warren. Check out the show notes at blacksynergypodcast.com/girlhaveyouread to learn more about these ladies and their movement to bring Black romance to the forefront. Thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, the podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and TuneIn Radio. Please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to follow the show at Black Synergy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.